Hello and welcome to Performance Check. My name is Rob, and this is a little stream about how insight is a pain in the ass. A pain in the ass indeed. Why, you might say. Let me give you an example. So, the other day, I was running Law Keepers, and I happen to think it went very well. It's up there with some of the best sessions I think I've done from that particular campaign. I really enjoyed it. It had lots of uh, different elements to it, but it didn't seem too stuffed or whatever. I had a really great time running it. But one thing happened within the session that made me involuntarily lose my temper for like half a second. I like to think I'm a generally quite a calm individual, but just one thing really got to me, and I'll explain. And this isn't anyone's fault, by the way. Like, it's my own problem, I guess. But running the game, Chris, my man, the blue alien of Planetoid, his character Azarax, the Drow illusionist, looks into an orb that allegedly shows you aspects and flashes of the future. And he looks into this orb. And by the way, spoilers for Lawkeepers, chapter 15, Face the Storm. If you want to check it out, I advise you do so. I'd recommend you do so because I thought it was a really good session. But anyway, spoilers. Azarax looks into this orb, right? And he sees a dark future where the Lawkeepers have failed and lost in some way. It seems like it hasn't gone particularly well for them. It doesn't really specify when or how or what's really going on, but suffice to say, it shows the Lawkeepers have failed in a big, bad way. And I won't say what's happened to them, but like it's pretty bad. Okay. And Azarax, being a smart wizard, knows that often with prophecy, once someone has been told a certain prophecy or been told the future, it will then become a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that no matter how the characters try and avoid it, they inadvertently cause that future to actually happen. So Azarax turns around to the Lawkeepers and says, "We win. We win. We actually win!" And like starts like celebrating, saying to them that actually he's seen a future where they succeed and everything's going to be great. And then Taylor, who plays Lise, and I will say beforehand, completely within her rights to do so, says, "I want to make an insight check." And for that millisecond, and you'll see it in the video, I think I even say, I'm like, "Oh, I hate that." I said, "I absolutely hate that," because I loved so much what Locris had done. And I thought it's such a cool, dramatic thing in the storytelling that Azarax will know something that the others don't. For a second, I went, "Oh, I hate that." Oh, I absolutely hate that. And I come to realize that I hate insight. Or maybe I hate's a strong word, but like I think in a lot of situations I really don't like it. And that's definitely one of them. By the way, Taylor, more than within her rights to be able to ask to do that. It's part of the rules of the game. It's there, and I accept that. However, I think it is a really big problem when it comes to running NPCs and NPCs that you spent some time like fleshing out, perhaps, and time considering their motivations. I like to think that I, do good work with my NPCs in the sense that I like to ensure that they have clear motivation and ensure that they work towards those motivations within the game. And sometimes that will bring them into conflict with the player characters. But the moment someone asks for an insight check, then obviously you're then going to have to determine whether that is what they're saying is a lie or whether they're being deceitful or if they're hiding something. And I think along with diplomacy checks and charisma checks, where I sometimes think that it's better to leave it to the role play rather than base it on a role, I think insight is definitely drawing that line for me as well. And the more I play, the more I realize this. And I mean, I'm a bit of a like. I like to be a bit flashy sometimes, and I know it's it's a bit corny perhaps, but like I like to have the big reveals and have NPCs that trick the players, because if I'm able to trick the players, then that makes them more invested, because they're like, oh my god, they've tricked us, I hate that character, or oh my god, we've been tricked into this situation, what are we going to do, that kind of feeling. So when all of that preparation is undermined by a single roll, that is a bitter pill to swallow. Now, don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. I don't believe in saying that, I wanted this to happen in my game, and because they worked it out, now I'm upset, because that isn't what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that I prefer those calculations and those instincts that the players get to be made because they've been given some information, rather than them just saying, I want to check to see if this person is lying. I'm going to make a tell me the truth roll. And I find it really kind of frustrating, because there have been a lot of things in games that I've been able to hide well, because I can cover over them, and I'm very careful with how I deliver the information about certain secrets or whatever like that. So because of that, there is a large portion of my GMing style that comes under threat from an insight check. Now, don't get me wrong, the game would still go on. If they got a successful insight check, I would absolutely tell them that this person's lying and that they're hiding something. I wouldn't fudge the roll. I do not believe in fudging the roll. No matter how badly I would love something to happen in a particular way, I don't want to sort of like force it to happen, if you know what I mean. But I find that particularly frustrating about insight checks, and I was wondering if other people feel the same. And if so, like, how do you balance when to ask for insight checks, or when to try and avoid them as best you can? I don't know. It's weird, because in that very same game, I used an insight check to. I asked them to make an insight check in that very game for another reason that I don't want to go into, but there was a particular moment where I wanted characters' feelings to surface for a second, like quite obviously, for them to pick up upon. But then I realized, before making the preparations or really collecting my thoughts before doing this stream, I realized that I didn't need to do that. There was no point in me saying, make an insight check. Oh, you see this individual's eyes flicker at the mention of this person's name. Didn't need to do that at all. I realized that was a completely useless check for me to have made them do, because I could have just told them that. I could have just said, at the mention of this character's name, you see a flicker in his eyes. Because there's no reason for me to ask them to do that if I want them to have that information in the first place. It doesn't benefit the story. It doesn't benefit the game in any way for me to hold that back. So I didn't really need to ask them to do an insight check. So in some cases, I find the insight check kind of a bit disruptive, and also I find it a little bit useless in other ways, because I can just say, look, you see this in this person's eyes, you see this in their gestures, and I don't know, I don't have any kind of solution as to how to sort of, I don't really think I have that clear definition on what I think should be done about it, but I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm a bit like, oh man, it kind of sucks. Really sucks, particularly between two player characters. I think, like I say, Taylor was well within her rights to do it. And that's fine. But I thought to myself, that kind of sucks. Now, thankfully, Azarax is a particularly good liar, so he was able to make a deception check to hide that. Now, admittedly, that's dramatic too, because we didn't know whether he was going to succeed on being lying, and that was up in the air. Don't get me wrong, I see the benefit in that, but the initial concept of Azarax hiding this information was much more appealing to me personally as a storyteller and as a games master than it before. Maybe I am being too fussy about it. Maybe I am trying to just be like, I really want this to happen, so I'm glad it happened. But at the same time, I don't stand in the way of any other role being made like that. So why should I stand in the way of insight checks? I don't know. I would love to hear people's thoughts about it, because I find it a little frustrating sometimes. I see I have a few comments already in the chat. Hello, everyone. This is a bit of a surprise to me, actually, because I didn't think I was going to be free today. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go live. I need to film some more my 30-day world stuff. I'm going to do them in bulk again at some point. Oh, lots of comments already. My goodness me. Taylor's here. Hey, Taylor. And I would like this to be put on record. This isn't me saying, Taylor, you shouldn't do this. Taylor's an amazing player. So, yeah, it's not a problem in that regard. Taylor says, how do you balance a player's natural suspicion with a character's knowledge or lack thereof? Well, this is the thing, Taylor. Because Lise wouldn't have known, you as a player know that you're suspicious because you know that he's hiding something from you. Would your character look for deception in one of your allies? Do you know what I mean? Like, would I mean, obviously the stakes are pretty high in that situation, in the sense, admittedly, oh, we win. At the current stage that you're at, it doesn't seem like you have a lot going for you. So I understand a little bit of disbelief, but to like be like, are you lying to me? That kind of, I don't know. How do you balance it, though? That's a very good question. How do you balance a player's natural suspicion with a character's knowledge? I think try and avoid it as much as possible. Like, it's tricky. I'm going to come back to that, Taylor, because it's a difficult one. Bob's here. He says, "What's cracking, my dude? Couldn't agree more. Insight roles can be troublesome. It plays too much like a superpower. Yeah, at least in certain places it does." Rob Daniel says, "Yes, it's common at my table for the players to ask if they can roll insight to see if someone appears to be truthful or not." I'm glad I'm not the only person that's come across it. Like I've kind of seen this before, and it isn't new. This isn't a new issue. Like back in 3.5, it was called sense motive, and the same thing would happen. I would be in games as either as a player or running the game where every single NPC a player came across could roll sense motive or insight. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, you need to earn that information. Like, you need to earn that. You shouldn't be just rolling and getting, because like that, it's the same philosophy I have with some certain kind of diplomacy and charisma based roles. Like I prefer to be able to talk those things out and for the players to actually either outsmart me or be, bring something new and surprise me, and you know what, and take a new tack with it rather than just making a roll, because I think that's kind of dull. But it's there for a reason. I know it's there for a reason, because the characters may be more insightful than a player, but is the player more insightful than the character because the player is the one that's making the character do it? It's weird. It's not an easy discussion topic to get your head around, but I'm going to do my best. Bob says, the way I get around it is by having random related insight rolls at unrelated times to raise suspicions and put them off the track. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Make an insight check and they'll be like, why? But if there's nothing for them to find with an insight check, is that like, I don't know. I mean, making a player roll for nothing, but without them knowing, I guess it is kind of a little bit of a sleight of hand, kind of, not an actual sleight of hand, but you know what I mean, like a deception. Yeah, I suppose that could work. Fair play. Rob Daniel says, I try to counteract it by giving them vague answers regardless of the role. If you don't feel it's something their character would pick up on. That's fair enough, Rob. This is the other thing, though, because if you're too vague, players are very, very smart, and they will be like, "You're not telling us everything," and then the whole game's up. They will then never trust that person ever again. As I experience a lot in my games, if even the slightest thing happens to a player because of an NPC, they will hate them. They will absolutely, unrelentingly hate them, and never trust them ever again. Will wish them harm, and will and will stay in that mindset forever and a day. So if you're not an exceptional liar or exceptionally good at hiding certain things that you have in your story, that's going to become a problem. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's even trickier when you're obviously in an interaction with, say, 4 other people that are trying to wheedle information out of you. It's very difficult. And I really don't think that it needs to be made any easier basing that discovery simply upon a roll. Yeah. Bob says, or make several successful insight rolls to get the whole story. You don't figure out one person in a single interaction. Yeah, and that goes into like the vague answers as well, but then already then you know something's up. Do you know what I mean? Ben Butler's here. Hey man, he says, hey Rob, maybe give out clues, i.e. you can see a manic gleam in the NPC's eyes. Oh, you can see a manic gleam in the NPC's eyes. I generally don't ask PCs to roll insight. They have to pay attention and say, can I roll insight? I agree. And it was entirely useless me asking them for that insight check at that particular point. It was a stressful situation and a separate situation I might add as well, where I asked them to make insight because I was like, there are certain points where you can just say, you see this, and it isn't hidden. I'll tell you what, the best use of insight I've seen was when I was in a Nicholas Dawson game very, very recently. And it was just a purely historical game, Roman game. We're all Roman soldiers. And Lloyd's character had to make an insight check to see how a particular battle was going that we were part of and that he was commanding troops in. Like Nico was like, make an insight check to see how effective your attack has been, because he's getting insight from the battle. He is a battle-hardened veteran. He knows how the battle's going. Like, that was a really good use of can you have roll an insight for me? Like, and it gave information, but it wasn't like, this is insight on how you can win the battle. There should be something written down in the rules that says like insight can give you a clue but not the answer. Maybe, I don't know. A DM's job is already hard enough to hide secrets and it's already hard enough, and you've already got 4 people working to discover all these things. So why give them just the like it was described earlier in the chat, a superpower essentially? I know if you're telling the truth or not. And also, you then have to roll a deception check if it is a lie. So even if you roll and you're successful in your deception check against the insight, the players then see that you've made a roll, thus meaning you are deceiving them. The players will then know definitely that character is lying, and it doesn't matter how much they don't try and metagame. They will work towards that NPC as a threat now. You know what I mean? And I'm not even saying that necessarily the NPC will be a threat. Maybe the NPC is trying to keep a secret to protect the player characters, perhaps. Like, it's not always just like trying to get one over on the players. That isn't the point of this discussion. It is just interaction with people is much more complicated than that. And I don't think it should be rewarded so greatly. Nicolas Jaquette says, but we're all mentalists. If you have an insight roll and it just gives you all the information in the end, yeah, you definitely are. Taylor says, I think this can be an issue with mental stats overall. Some things can be done through RP and players sorting it out, but when you have a character with high mental stats, there's an imbalance. It's true. But I mean, put it this way then, like if I had an NPC that was trying to keep a secret, let's think of an example. Someone has been stealing kegs of mead out the back of a tavern, okay? And as a player, as a GM, I want to try and keep that as deep a secret as possible. And then say the player characters instantly find a dwarf, right? They find a dwarf around the back of the tavern, and they say, are you the one responsible for stealing the mead? And he goes, no, it's too late. You already know he has, because because human beings are very, very, very perceptive. Another thing we're playing online. This is another thing we're playing online. You are more easily able to detect a lie if you are just listening and not looking, because body language is a large part of how a human being can lie to someone. Its performance is lying. So if you were to just look away and listen to the voice, then it becomes even harder. It's a tricky one. Rob Daniel says, good point, Rob. Try to keep in mind if it's the player or the character that's trying to gain insight. Exactly. But I think both of those are either way, it's filled with issues. It is filled with issues. Ben Butler says, I think Matt Colville said that insight, perception, and stealth could be rolled by the DM for the PC. Whenever they want to roll it, the action still happens, but a player doesn't know for sure. Yeah, that's I suppose one way that you could do it, but I don't want to take that out of the hands of the players. And no offense to Matt Colville, but I think Matt Colville has a very kind of hands-on. I'm going to make some enemies, I think, if I talk too much about Matt Colville. It's happened before. The most dislikes I've ever had on my page is when I spoke about Matt Colville. I just think that he likes things to be the way that he. No, I'm not even going to do it. I'm not going to start. I'm not going to start. Fair enough. If you want to do that, then by all means do. But I will not be, for reasons I will not disclose. Munzana Taylor says, insight versus a specific person is always tricky. I like the idea of insight into a situation like a tactics role. Yes, exactly. The Nico thing. Yeah, absolutely. Nicolas Chacat says, that's a good idea, Ben, but then the players would argue that the skill is unreliable. They love being good. Yeah. And also, I don't know, it's like the DM has that sort of opportunity to fudge rolls at any opportunity, and now they have in their power the ability to fudge player rolls as well. And my whole point is saying that I don't want to fudge a deception roll to make sure that the insight check doesn't work, so don't make the insight check or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's just taking more control on the hands of the players, and I don't want that. Which is what Matt Colville loves doing. I did it. Whatever. No, I actually really like Matt Colville for a number of reasons. Let's see. Well, where did I get to? I want a sip of tea. Let's have a look. Taylor says, so when a player is suspicious, is it safe to assume the character is suspicious as well? Yeah, I think it's fine, but for what reason is the player suspicious? If the player is suspicious because of information that they wouldn't know, for example, Azarak seeing something that and then saying he saw something else, there is no reason or limited reasons why you would be mistrusting of him. I don't know. It's tricky. That's just an example. I'm not saying that that's correct in that particular circumstance, Taylor, because I know you were obviously involved in that. And this isn't. I'm not actually going to go into it. I'm not even going to go into it. Infinite Roleplay. Hey, dude. He says, I'm a bit late. Does insight have to be exacting? This is exactly my point. Rob Daniel says he has his own style, or diplomatic way to say it. Yeah, he does have his own style. If you're talking about Matt Colville. I like Matt Colville. I promise. I like him. I think he's cool. Infinite Roleplay, can it be truthful while being a bit ambiguous. But that's this is what and you might have missed this earlier, man, but I I was saying earlier that as soon as a player can sniff out that you're being kind of ambiguous or vague, they'll know that something isn't right anyway, thus meaning that their insight check is successful because they then know something's wrong, even if the roll wasn't particularly good. Do you see what I mean? And then added to it, if I'm having to make a deception check to counter the insight check, then that's also telling the players, well, he's definitely hiding something, hiding enough to have to make a check. So, like, just a pain in the ass. Such a pain in the ass. Depending on the questions asked, of course. Yes, I agree. Ben Butner, yeah, those are all good points. I just thought I would mention it, different ways to do things and all. Yeah, absolutely. I'm if you use insight in your table all the time, then that's cool. Everyone plays the way they want to play. I'm just saying that it frustrates me because my particular style isn't hampered, but it's something that I'm always wary of because I'm just like, oh, they're going to make a tell me the truth roll, aren't they? And I don't know. But put it this way, I've put in the effort to ensure that I'm hiding this information well enough that it's going to take some kind of creative use of the characters, diplomatic and investigation skills to uncover. And if they do that, they will discover that secret. However, I do get slightly irked when it's left to a roll, put it that way. Nicolas Chaquette says, I never really give what the NPC is really thinking, only that he's maybe lying or looks like he's telling the truth. Absolutely, like you can say, oh, he looks kind of uncomfortable, or he looks kind of shifty. Players who think they can read minds with insight won't get much from me. But to tell whether someone is lying or not, sometimes that's all it takes, and then the whole thing's done. Do you know what I mean? Infinite roleplay. Well, Rob, that depends on how you play your NPCs. I love playing more with my players' perceptions rather than that of their characters. I feel it creates more genuine responses sometimes. Exactly. Sometimes. I would love to hear an example of how you play with your players' perceptions rather than their characters, because I find it's the players that are the ones that are the problem, not the characters. The players are the ones that are seeing me having to roll that deception check, for instance, or seeing that maybe I flinch once too much when I say something that isn't true. Can't NPCs sound shifty but be honest? It's the same as people in real life. Absolutely, and I do that sometimes. I do obviously make some people seem really, really shifty and have made questionable actions in the past to make that seem like ambiguous. But yeah, you just don't know, do you? I mean, overall, I haven't had too much trouble with it, but when a role, basically when it comes to making a role or having a cool conversation where you uncover the truth by yourself, it will always be the latter for me. It will always be someone putting effort into the game rather than, yeah. And I'm not saying that my players weren't putting an effort into my particular game. They obviously put an immense amount of effort into my game, which I'm infinitely grateful for. But I have been in situations in the past where that has been the case, and the insight check is just, it just enables that, Infinite roleplay. Well, there are tropes and stereotypes that many follow as law, sadly. Playing with those tropes and uncreative expectations is what I'm talking about. Yeah, but this is what I'm saying, man. Like, give me an example of you playing with player perceptions rather than the characters. Like, I'm intrigued by what your response would be for that. Because it isn't easy, especially when you've got 4 people that are watching your every move and you're having to improvise your way through the conversations and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I mean, this is going to sound like a boast. Maybe it is a boast, but I've managed to trick players a number of times, like thankfully, but it isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination. Like it's a continual dance of what information I'm giving to them. And it's yeah, and it's just a shame when just the simple roll of the dice can unravel that. Nature of the game, I suppose. The rolling of a die can affect many things. It's just that if you're rolling to attack, that's fine. If you're rolling to see the truth, then infinite roleplay. I like to imagine the social position of an NPC and how they would perceive the world depending on their experience. Okay. I like to imagine the social position of an NPC and how they would perceive the world depending on their experience. So, okay, I think I understand what you mean. So, the way that they deliver the information then would be altered by their experiences. Most players fail to relate and empathize with such a difference in world experience. Okay, fair enough. Ben Butner says one way to not have to tip your hand by rolling deception is to create a static DC. In 5th edition, 8 plus deception skill bonus. A passive deception. Yes, I understand that. I'm aware of this, but I mean that also could have. I don't know. Like that's too easy. I think it really is too easy, especially when you're dealing with characters that are of relatively high level. Lawkeepers are now level 8, and some of their skill rolls are crazy. Or I say crazy, 5th edition crazy. And that would be nothing. You know, a static DC would be nothing. That it would be doing the NPC a disservice to just have a base DC rather than making the roll themselves. You know. So while I think that yeah, absolutely, it's a good way of hiding the fact that you're making a roll. I don't know. It's tricky. Infinite Roleplay says their behavior, language, and experience would naturally be colored by their past. I mean, that's fair enough, but I don't know. I think you will struggle to hold up against 4 people grilling you whilst you're trying to think of their past and behavioral patterns and stuff whilst that's going on, and you're trying to give them the information without trying to keep it a secret. It's interesting. I understand. Like it says, I talk better. I talk. I understand, man. Like I've asked you a couple of questions now. This is something I would like people to respond to. So please feel free to go live, because I for some reason I can't go live on Facebook at the moment. Every time my phone is really bad with the Wi-Fi, and my laptop is just like Facebook can't create a live video, and I'm like, yes, you can. You've done it a lot of times before. Why can't you do it? So I have to bring people to YouTube to watch, sadly. But I would like people to respond to this. I mean, I think I'm probably going to leave it there. Actually, I mean, I have my ways of dealing with it. It won't stop me tricking and keeping secrets from my players, and it won't undermine my NPCs. I don't think, but at the same time, it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. But then I suppose my passing question would be, who does that fall to? Does that fall to me as a GM to explain that insight rolls won't work unless you're seeking certain types of information? Or is it upon a player to say, you know what, I'm actually going to try and role play and not expect? I think it's just dealing with expectations, I think. You know. Is it down to the player to level their expectations for what a single role can grant them? I think that would be a good question to answer, maybe. So we'll see. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming by. I seem really frustrated by this, and I'm in some ways I am, in other ways I'm like, well, it is part of the rules, so just get over it. So I'm just interested to see what other people think. Anyway, I had lots of people join me, which I was not expecting. So thank you very much for um, talking in the chat. It means a lot. Always good to have people to chat with. So in the meantime, if you like this video, give it a like. If you'd like to see more like it, give me a subscribe or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Take it easy, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.